Hey, what's up guys, what's happening here? And today I'm presenting the video. I can't speak today, guys. Today I'm bringing us the video, and this video is going to be a theory video on when the missing children incident took place. Now, I just wanted to do a little intro here, just to say, if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas, because this video is going out on Christmas. And I just want to say, I want you all to spend a lot of good time celebrating with your family today. If you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a nice day in general. If you celebrate something else, happy holidays. But to those of you who celebrate Christmas, which I feel like is probably most of you, though I could be wrong about that, but a lot of you probably celebrate Christmas. So I want to say Merry Christmas to all of you. And I just want to say, here's my gift to you. This theory is my gift to you for Christmas. I hope it's a good gift. I'm gonna be laying out all the evidence and stuff for each theory on the missing children incident. I'm gonna get into that a bit more in a second. I just want to say, Merry Christmas, guys. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I mean, enjoy the video, not enjoyed. This part isn't scripted. I only script like the actual rest of the video. You know, the part that doesn't show my face in it. I only script that. So right now I'm kind of just winging it, and I'm just saying whatever comes to mind. So yeah, I hope you all enjoy the video. Let's get started. Because it was leaked like 2 months before release, the story Pressure in Tales from the Pizzaplex Book 3, Somnophobia, was accidentally spoiled for me a little bit. The story became a huge talking point because everybody said that apparently the story debunks the idea that the missing children incident was in 1983. However, now that I've read the story myself, I found that all it says is that spring locks were retired not long after they were created because the locks were dangerous. This doesn't really support either side, and I don't understand why it was such a huge talking point. Or, well, I do, it's because it connects us to FNaF 3, but this doesn't really specify anything. It kind of just reiterates what FNaF 3 already tells us. However, my opinions on the placement of the missing children incident have actually changed since the past times I've talked about the topic. So in this video, I'm going to be looking over all of the evidence for each time placement, theory of the missing children incident, and I'm going to be discussing why and how the placements work, and I'll be making an informed decision on which I think is more likely by the end of the video. So, without further ado, let's begin.
Make me a hero, someone to turn to and rely on their will to win. Make me a hero who puts up a fight both day and night. Oh.
Back when FNaF 4 first released, just about everyone believed that the missing children incident had already happened by that point, and there are two main reasons for this. The main plot of FNaF 4 revolves around how the bite victim has seen something that has caused him to be afraid of the animatronics, most specifically Fredbear. This is believed by many to be that the bite victim actually saw the missing children incident take place. This is stemmed from the line of, "Don't you remember what you saw?" from the Fredbear plush. Some actually believe that it is supported by Into the Pit. In Into the Pit, we have Oswald, who sees the dead bodies of the children lined up against the wall. This is pretty interesting on its own, but it's made more interesting by the fact that the kid who witnesses these murders is a kid whose father transforms into Spring Bonnie, which to me seems to suggest that this kid is meant to represent a child of William Afton. It's made much more interesting that this kid sneaks out of his house at night to go to Jeff's Pizza, which used to be a Fazbear branded location. This is what we see happen in Midnight Motorist. It's still commonly debated whether or not Midnight Motorist is truly about the Aftons, but I think it is very clear that it is. For one, the Midnight Motorist house matches the one on the title screen of FNaF 4. It's the same house, and it wouldn't make sense that the house on the screen of FNaF 4 has nothing to do with the events of FNaF 4 themselves. There's also the fact that it's night and raining in both the Security Puppet minigame and Midnight Motorist, and Midnight Motorist in the game files is named Later That Night, meaning it's the same night as the one where Charlie dies. However, William drives a purple car when he kills Charlotte, and Orange Guy in Midnight Motorist also drives a purple car. Curse of Dreadbear reinforces this as we see the FNaF 4 menu screen house on a hill in a DLC surrounding Dreadbear, a character who is named after Fredbear combined with the word dread. Dread isn't an uncommon word or anything, but the words existential dread are found in the logbook, coincidentally on the same pages where the alter text appears. The alter text is also written by the bite victim, and dread is the perfect word to describe the bite victim's feelings during his birthday party where he is bitten by Fredbear. And what is the alter text that replaces existential dread on the Night 4 to Night Shift rating page? It was for me. This line references the birthday party. It's in response to "the party was for you," and it's saying, well, he felt existential dread on the party that was his. the party in which the bite victim who is writing alter text in the logbook feels existential dread. The bite victim feels dread on the day he's killed by Fredbear, i.e. dread Dreadbear. And one last thing, the bite victim was bitten on his head by Fredbear, and what is the one thing that Dreadbear is associated with? The brain. Dreadbear is meant to represent the bite victim, and given that only 2 new characters in Curse of Dreadbear were a bear and a fox, the 2 animatronics who represent the bite victim and Michael. And the fox character is literally based on the Grim Reaper, the harbinger of death, and Michael is the one who killed the bite victim. Dreadbear and Grim Foxy represent the bite victim and Michael respectively. Though that part is just a tangent as it isn't really relevant for this theory, the important thing right now is that Dreadbear represents the bite victim. So the fact that there used to be an Easter egg when pressing a button and looking at the car behind us where the lights on the car turn purple, and that connects it to William Afton, and then Dreadbear appears on the hill along with the FNAF 4 house. This basically tells us that this house belongs to Dreadbear, and therefore it belongs to the bite victim. But even if we're to say that this doesn't matter, there's still more. Some could argue that the purple lights on the car represent Orange Guy's car, but don't have to represent William's. Maybe both of them have purple cars. However, the Dreadbear Easter egg was removed, and nowadays when we trigger the lights of the car turning purple, Glitchtrap, William Afton himself, appears on a hill near the house, implying that it's his house. Both of these Easter eggs pretty much tell us that the FNAF 4 house, which is the Midnight Motorist house, belongs to the Afton family. One could argue that it's a different house to the one from the FNAF 4 minigames, but consider what we learned from the Security Breach CDs. Vanessa is said to have a father named Bill whose wife divorced him and ended up offing herself. Bill is just short form for the name William. It's very likely that Vanessa is either using a fake backstory or she is possessed by or being manipulated by Elizabeth Afton, but that's a theory for another day. Either way, what it seems like is that William's wife divorced him and maybe she ended up moving away to a secluded area where she ended up killing herself. William, being a businessman running a very successful company at the time, already owns at least 3 properties which we know from the syslocation map, and that's excluding all the property he owns in restaurants or the rental service itself. William is rich, and it's very possible that after his ex-wife died, William bought her house and buried her in the clearing where we find that lump of what seems like dirt. It could be where William buried his ex-wife. What it comes down to is that William is rich and can own multiple houses, so the Midnight Motorist house could just be another house that they own. Maybe they swap back and forth, living in different places on different days or weeks. I realize I've gone on a lot about Midnight Motorist, and that's not really the point of this video, but it will come into play again later on, so it was necessary. For now, though, the point is that the bite victim is the runaway kid from Midnight Motorist, and also from Into the Pit sneaks out of the house in a very similar manner. Oswald has connections with the bite victim, and he witnessed the missing children incident. So this could potentially suggest that the bite victim witnessed the missing children incident, but there's one other thing to suggest this. FNAF World is all about the Fredbear plush, setting up Happiest Day for the bite victim and all the missing children, as they are his friends. The logbook implies this as on a page about someone you love dying a gruesome death by getting stuffed into an animatronic. The faded text asks the bite victim, "Do you miss them?" implying he was friends with them. The interesting thing about this is that the plushies the bite victim has are claimed by him to be his friends. This isn't mind-boggling on its own. The bite victim is a kid, and kids claim their stuffed animals, dolls, or toys to be their friends all the time. It's just more interesting that in the final minigame of FNAF 4, the plushies say, "We are still your friends." This line is repeated in FNAF World. This is interesting as it implies sentience within the plushies, possibly trying to say that the Fredbear plush isn't the only plushie possessed. What if the rest of the plushies, the ones of the core 4, contain the missing children's spirits? And if that's the case, they would have already been dead by FNAF 4. FNAF World is a really important game because while many consider it non-canon, Scott himself has confirmed that the lore ingrained into the game is in fact canon, and the game portrays Happiest Day being set up. The fact that the puppet is shown in FNAF 3 to be the one who set up Happiest Day, but then in FNAF World it's shown to be the Fredbear plush as the lines from the end of FNAF 4 are repeated, confirms that the one possessing the plushie is the puppet. The puppet possesses the Fredbear plush, though due to the text color being different, the puppet is likely only the Fredbear plush for the final minigame, while it's someone else, possibly William himself, speaking through the plushie for the rest of the game. However, the interesting thing about the pieces of Happiest Day is that they actually stem from the bite victim's memories. Balloon Boy's air adventure is a connection to the bite victim's memory of the balloon kid on the sidewalk. Mangle's quest connects to the memory of the Mangle toy in Elizabeth's bedroom. Chica's party connects to the memory of the toy girl in the playground with her toys of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica. The toys connecting to the actual toy animatronics, emphasizing the missing beak of Toy Chica, who is the player character in Chica's party. Stage 01, while it's seemingly taking place at Freddy's, is very very similar to the stage at Fredbear's, which is an obvious memory of the stage itself. Shadow Bonnie's minigame is a connection to the purple shaded shadows of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie on the stage, reflecting down into the restaurant as we see in the minigames. This is also why Shadow Bonnie starts on stage 01, because while the entity of Shadow Bonnie didn't technically originate, can't speak guys, while the entity of Shadow Bonnie didn't technically originate there, the shadow that he represents originated from the stage of Fredbear's, which stage 01 is a memory of, despite it actually being Freddy's. And of course, Happy's Day is a mirror image of the entire Fredbear's Family Diner restaurant, down to the positioning of the animatronics being almost identical with one very minor difference. All of the pieces of Happy's Day are the bite victim's memories, and what is interesting about that is in FNAF 3, the way we enter the Mangle's Quest minigame is a specific code. Top left, top right, bottom right. This may not seem like much at first, but in both the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame from FNAF 2 and the opening and trailer to FNAF AR, this matches the positioning of each animatronic. Chica top left, Bonnie bottom left, Freddy top right, Foxy bottom right. Further intertwining the FNAF AR trailer with Give Gifts, Give Life is the appearance of Markiplier in the center of all the others. In Give Gifts, Give Life, Golden Freddy is in the middle. Obviously, Markiplier isn't Golden Freddy, but he was the one to popularize the name of Golden Freddy itself. Remember, Golden Freddy was originally named Yellow Bear, but fans nicknamed him Golden Freddy, and that name was popularized by Markiplier's second FNAF 1 video being titled, Was That Golden Freddy? The important thing about this order is that this is the order that the kids died in. Chica died first, as she says in Ultimate Custom Night. Pizza Party portrays William Afton luring and killing Gabriel, who possesses Freddy, but there are party hats on Bonnie and Chica, but not one on Foxy. This means that both Susie and Jeremy were killed before Gabriel. Since Susie is first, the order goes Susie, Jeremy, Gabriel, and then Fritz. The fact that one of the bite victim's memories is the order of the deaths of the missing children could imply that he had seen the murders. So, I know it was like 10 minutes ago, but remember how I said that there are two main things from FNAF 4 that led people to believe that the missing children incident took place before the bite? And what I mean by that is that there were two things that led people to believe that when FNAF 4 first released. However, nowadays there's more evidence or evidence that was expanded on, most of which I have gone over already. However, I haven't yet gone over the second thing, and that is Pigtail Girl. In FNAF 4, the bite victim runs into a girl with pigtails on his way home from Fredbear's. Contrary to what some people believe, this isn't important in and of itself. The only reason this is important isn't really because of her herself, but rather because of what she says. Pigtail Girl tells the bite victim, "You better watch out, I hear they come to life at night, and if you die they hide your body and never tell anyone." This describes what the animatronics do and how Phone Guy describes them in FNAF 1. This would potentially imply that the animatronics are already possessed, which would mean the missing children incident already happened. And the final piece of evidence comes from the Silver Eyes. In the Silver Eyes, the missing children incident was said to have been in 1985. However, the Silver Eyes runs in parallel with FNAF 1. It's the first book, like FNAF 1 was the first game, and the story goes that the child of an old owner of Freddy's returns to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and faces off against the possessed animatronics. The reason this is important is because the Silver Eyes takes place 10 years after the missing children incident. If the Silver Eyes runs in parallel with FNAF 1, then shouldn't it take place 10 years after the missing children incident too? FNAF 1 takes place in 1993. This is basically confirmed at this point. FNAF AR was originally going to have some fast facts, probably for loading screens. They were scrapped, but it's safe to say that they are correct information because how would they have been created? These fast facts say that the Freddy's Pizza recipe was most popular from 1988 to 1993, meaning that's the time frame the FNAF 1 location was opened. The pay rate lines up with the minimum wage in 1993. The date of the paycheck lines up as well. FNAF 1 closes in 1993 or later, as if Freddy's was closed any earlier than 1993, it would be impossible for Freddy's Pizza recipe to be popular in 1993 because it wouldn't exist anymore. The newspapers in FNAF 1 say that Freddy's will close by year's end, meaning the gameplay of FNAF 1 takes place the year that it closes. If Freddy's closed later than 1993, that doesn't work, because either the paycheck wouldn't line up with the year, or the date wouldn't line up with the year, because obviously not every year is structured the same way. Different dates fall on different days of the week, and it makes the most sense that night 1 is a Monday and night 5 is a Friday. The date of November 12th falls on a Friday in 1993, but it doesn't any later than that that in a year that lines up with the minimum wage. Some argue that the same date is used in 1987 and that Night 5 isn't on a Friday, but the year structure is the same in 1992. However, like I said, that's impossible because FNAF 1 closes the year it happens, and Freddy's has to be open until at least 1993, meaning it has to be the year of FNAF 1. So now, going back to the Silver Eyes, if the 10 years later thing remains consistent with both the Silver Eyes and FNAF 1, that would place the missing children incident in 1983, as that's 10 years before FNAF 1 in 1993. So that's all the evidence that the missing children incident takes place in 1983, at least to my knowledge, but what's the evidence it was in 1985? I will say there is less evidence, but I feel that the evidence is slightly stronger because there's not really very many ways that it could be explained away, and as I'll talk about later on, the evidence of the missing children incident taking place in 1983 can basically all be explained away pretty easily. So what is this evidence that the missing children incident takes place in 1985? The first piece of evidence I go over isn't great evidence, as it's just a theory and not factual information or anything, but it's still worth mentioning. Earlier in the video, I mentioned the toy girl from the FNAF 4 minigame, the little girl in the playground who had a bunch of toys of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, but her design is actually very similar to Susie's as we see in FNAF 6. The colors are a bit off, but they're pretty close, and the sprite colors in FNAF aren't consistent, so it very well could be an intentional match. Susie has blonde hair, and Toy Girl's hair seems to be blonde as well, albeit a bit darker. Both Susie and Toy Girl have blue eyes, and both have red bows in their hair. Now, this isn't solid evidence or anything, but it does bring up the question of whether or not Susie and the Toy Girl are actually one and the same. But if we look to the Fazbear Frights, in the story Coming Home, we follow a girl named Susie who died at 6 years old after being lured at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and she also really likes playing with her toys. This could be taken as a further suggestion that the toy girl is Susie, but of course, this is just a theory. The other theory is that the Freddy bully from FNAF 4 is actually Fritz, the victim who possesses Foxy. Now, admittedly, this theory is a little shaky, as depending on how old he is in FNAF 4 and the final solution I come up with for when the missing children incident actually is, the Freddy bully might not actually be a kid anymore by the time of the missing children incident. You could also argue that he is at the very least a teenager and would probably know better than to be lured, as well as into the pit claiming the dead kids to be no older than Oswald, who was at the time 10. So do take this theory with a grain of salt, as while it does make sense in some ways, it also doesn't in some regards. Therefore, it's absolutely not a factually correct idea, but I do think it is an idea worth considering. Isn't it weird to consider the fact that every single missing child story has been elaborated upon in some way? Coming Home, while depicting a different version of Susie, shed some light on her characterization and backstory, as well as Ultimate Custom Night and The Fourth Closet, basically telling us how she died. As well as FNAF 6, pretty much. Everything tells us how she died, everything tells us her story. In the comedy bot performances from Security Breach, some light is shed on the story of Jeremy, the victim possessing Bonnie. The comedy bots talk about a kid named Jeremy being left behind by his parents. This seems to be implying that this is the story of Jeremy. His parents left him behind at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, making him an easy target for William Afton. This isn't confirmed, but it seems like it is what it's trying to tell us. Gabriel's story was displayed in Pizza Party. We learned that he was late to his own birthday party and he was lured away and killed by William Afton. And Cassidy's story of how she died hasn't been explained, but her characterization and her storyline throughout the series has been displayed and hinted at on multiple occasions. But Fritz? We've learned nothing about Fritz outside of just that he possesses Foxy. Unless we have learned more than that. When I read the final Fazbear Frights book, I stopped reading after Kids at Play. I didn't like the story, and because of that, I didn't feel any motivation to keep reading. I wasn't motivated to read the final Fazbear Frights story, Find Player 2. When I finally did read Find Player 2, months had already passed, so I decided that instead of doing a summary of the story like I usually do, I made a video going over cool and interesting details that I found in the story, something I used to do very often and will continue to do every once in a while in the future. In that video, I went over some evidence that this story provides towards the idea of the Freddy bully being Fritz. Find Player 2 tells the story of a girl named Amy who left her friend behind at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and that friend ended up going missing. 10 years later, Amy returns to Freddy's to investigate what happened, finding that it was her fault that her friend, whose name is Mary Jo, went missing. While this doesn't end up being a murder, it is a kid who goes missing. This is very interesting because while it isn't part of an actual missing children incident, it does seem to connect to it in some way. Mary Jo is said to act younger than she actually is, still having a teddy bear, which could connect her to the bite victim, as Amy definitely seems to be a representation of Michael, but the bite victim never went missing. You could say if BB5th is true, then he technically did go missing, but him dying in the missing children incident even then would have nothing to do with Michael, and Amy is the one responsible for Mary Jo's death. Having a teddy bear connects Mary Jo further with Freddy. Being friends with a character connected to Mike is very interesting. A character associated with Freddy who acts younger than she is, being friends with and going missing because of her friend who is associated with Michael Afton. This could imply that the Freddy bully, obviously associated with Freddy, is stupid enough to get lured by William as he acts younger than he is, and as a result he goes missing, and the Freddy bully is also of course friends with Michael. This, along with the fact that the Freddy bully is the only bully without glowing white eyes, implying he is unique than the rest, could imply that the Freddy bully is a missing kid. But what suggests that he is Foxy rather than someone like Freddy himself? Well, for that, let's look to FNAF 2. I think it's pretty clear by now that Michael Afton is the Foxy masked brother from FNAF 4. Evidence seems to suggest that Michael Afton is actually Fritz Smith in FNAF 2, using a fake name. But Fritz? Mike uses the name Fritz, the same name as one of the missing kids? Is it possible that he actually uses this name because he was friends with the victim? Michael begins the series wearing a Foxy mask, but then he becomes the player of FNAF 2, and under the name Fritz Smith, the name of the victim possessing Foxy, Michael is forced to wear a Freddy mask. If the Freddy believes Fritz, he begins the series wearing a Freddy mask, and then he ends up possessing Foxy. Let me repeat. Mike starts the series wearing a Foxy mask, and in FNAF 2, he wears a Freddy mask. Fritz starts the series wearing a Freddy mask, and in FNAF 2, he is Foxy. The roles basically swap is what I'm saying, and it seems like it really is trying to tell us that Fritz is the Freddy bully. But of course, none of this is a fact. It is just a theory, but if Fritz is the Freddy bully, and if Susie is the toy girl, they're still alive by the time of the FNAF 4 minigames, meaning the missing children incident happened in 1985, or at the very least 1983, but after the bite at the earliest. That's what I used to believe, but I don't anymore. The next piece of evidence to suggest that the missing children incident was in 1985 comes from FNAF 3. This is the detail that sprung many people to action when Pressure released, as Pressure expanded on it. In FNAF 3, Phone Guy says that the springlock suits are being retired and are being looked at by technicians after an unfortunate springlock failure, and that replacements would be arriving soon enough. But then, after these springlocks are retired, the missing children incident happens, which we know as the Spring Bonnie suit has been moved, and shortly after that the safe rooms are sealed off as well, because that's where the kids were lured to and killed in. If the springlock suits were decommissioned before the missing children incident, how are there springlock suits in FNAF 4? And the final pieces of evidence are what I consider to be the strongest, Into the Pit and the Silver Eyes. In the past, I've discussed that it seems more likely that Into the Pit represents the Save Them incident from FNAF 2 rather than the original Missing Children incident. But looking at it now, I feel like it's a combination of both. I still 100% believe that this is meant to represent Save Them, but I feel like the story has a double meaning, both to give the year of the Missing Children incident and to shift the timeline to dictate for us when Sister Location takes place. About a month ago, the Dark Rooms podcast, a group of some of my friends, did an episode where they interviewed an official FNAF artist who has worked on graphic novels, Anthony Morris Jr. In that interview, he gave some insight on how the graphic novels work. The artists are given a script that each page should follow, and from there they have creative freedom. The reason this is important is because one of the pages of Into the Pit has a parent yelling for their child named Susie. This tells us that Into the Pit is in fact about the original Missing Children incident. However, there is still the fact that in Into the Pit, there are 6 victims, matching how there are 6 pools of blood in Save Them. People are also running and screaming, implying people have seen the bodies, and in Save Them, they're scattered around, and Phone Guy basically tells us that people have seen them. So it really seems like Into the Pit is meant to represent the Missing Children incident and Save Them simultaneously. The fact that it represents the Missing Children incident begs the question of why the year 1985 would be used if it took place in 1983, considering that Phasma Frights is meant to give lore for the series that we haven't solved yet. But the fact that it seems to represent Save Them would imply the events of Phasma Frights take place 2 years early. Sergio's Lucky Day has numerous connections to Sister Location, which I've talked about in videos in the past, and it takes place in 1995. If Into the Pit is 2 years early, that would place Sister Location in 1997, which matches the year of the 4th closet. You see, earlier I talked about how the Silver Eyes has the Missing Children incident in 1985, but the book takes place 10 years after the Missing Children incident, and applying that same logic to FNAF 1, the Missing Children incident would be in 1983. But there's a bit of an issue with that. The Silver Eyes shows William Afton getting springlocked. This takes place during the story, meaning obviously in the same year as the rest of the story. If FNAF 1 correlates to the Silver Eyes, that would mean that William got springlocked in 1993. The Follow Me minigames take place in 1993. But the problem with that is that is actually impossible. See, the Follow Me minigames take place after the FNAF 1 location has closed down, but the thing is that they can't take place in 1993 because Freddy's closes at the end of the year. If Follow Me took place at the very end of the year, then it wouldn't make a lot of sense that it's raining, as it would be in December, and if Google is correct, it snows in Utah. Though I don't actually live there, so I don't know for sure, and I've never been there, so yeah, I don't know if it actually snows there, but if it does, then yeah, that doesn't really make sense that it's raining. I mean, it could just be like global warming or whatever, but still. But either way, looking at the design of the restaurant in Follow Me, it is very clear that a long time has passed since the location closed down. Not only is it empty, but it is completely broken down, holes in the roof, and it's infested with rats. Or slippers, one of the two. But since Follow Me can't be in 1993, it makes the most sense, especially based on the Silver Eyes, that it would be in 1995. That would revert the timeline back to the missing children incident taking place 10 years before William is springlocked, meaning in the games, it would be in 1985. So that's all the evidence to suggest that the missing children incident is in 1985, so looking back at the evidence, which one is more likely? More of the evidence of the missing children incident taking place in 1983 have explanations. Charlotte Emily has already died by the time of FNAF 4, and Charlotte possesses the puppet. She moves around at night. Pigtail Girl's rumor may have come from Charlotte possessing the puppet rather than Freddy and the gang. The plushies from FNAF 4 are believed to have the spirits of the missing children because of the line, "We are still your friends." After each line, one of the plushies disappears. This implies that it's the plushie that disappears saying each line. However, every line is spoken in the same text color, meaning it's just the Fredbear plushie saying each line through the plushies. Therefore, I don't think the plushies are actually possessed by the missing kids. The bite victim seeing the missing children incident doesn't make any actual sense because the victims are lured to the safe room where no customers are allowed. Therefore, the bite victim doesn't have access to witness the missing children incident. The only way he could have witnessed it is if he was a part of it, under BV5th. But even then, it wouldn't be something he saw. The missing kids were all lured and stuffed separately, meaning the bite victim couldn't see them get killed and he couldn't have seen their bodies. As for the evidence of the missing children incident being in 1985, the idea of Toy Girl and Freddy Bowling being Susie and Fritz respectively is just a theory and isn't solid evidence. Some also say that it's possible that FNAF 4 was after the Springlock failure, but that the Springlocks weren't yet actually discontinued. Phone Guy mentions replacement suits that will arrive, so it could just be that the missing children incident and Spring Bonnie being tied to it got that idea shut down, and that's what discontinued the Springlocks. Or you could say that the replacements did arrive, and then the bite is what discontinued them. Either option works, and really either option is logical. Your belief on it really just depends on when you believe the missing children incident to take place. Based on all the evidence, I would say that it is more likely that the missing children incident takes place in 1985, but I think either option really works. But I feel another question we should ask is when in the timeline Elizabeth Afton dies. However, I feel that, again, any option works. Midnight Motorist doesn't show her at all, which is weird because FNAF 6 is based around tying up loose ends, so if she was alive at this point, you'd think that they would show her. She's not in FNAF 4 either. The problem with her dying before Midnight Motorist, though, is that it doesn't make sense for her to die before Charlotte. It could be that William's wife died, as I said before, and his anger through this caused the Circus Baby animatronic to grow corrupt, as he was making it. Maybe Baby wasn't originally meant to kill, but William felt urges to murder while he was building her, and that influenced her to do so, similar to her corruption through Henry's anger in the books. Then, maybe she was actually equipped with perks to kill later on in the timeline. Another option could be that Afton was completely thrown off the deep end from his wife's death, and he intentionally built Baby to kill because of his newfound insanity because of his wife's death. Many people think that Elizabeth died a bit later in the timeline because Hand Unit says that Circus Babies was after Freddy's closed. However, when he says this, he's talking about Circus Babies Entertainment and Rental, not Circus Babies Pizza World. We know that because immediately after that line, he starts talking about the rental service. Elizabeth dying before Charlotte can make sense, but it also makes more sense for her to die later. But her absence heavily implies that she does die before Charlotte. It's really up for interpretation. It's technically possible that Elizabeth wasn't even born yet and was born shortly after FNAF 4, her bedroom just preparation for when she is born. I don't really know, but what I want to know is what you guys think. When do you think Elizabeth died? And when do you think the missing children incident happened? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you did enjoy this video, please do leave a like and subscribe if you want to, and I will see you all in the next video. If you celebrate Christmas, I want all of you to go and have a good time celebrating with your family, and if you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you just have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys, and Merry Christmas.